So we are holding on the Mishnah on Daf Ayin Amud Aleph. We did the Mishnah last time, but we're going to start again from the beginning of the parak. So says the Mishnah, Ayin Amud Aleph. Ha'arel v'chol hatimeim lo yochlu b'truma. Somebody who does not have a Brit Milah or any other Kohen who is Tameh, they cannot eat Truma. But Nishehen v'avdehen yochlu b'truma. Their wives and their avadim are able to eat Truma. Patsua, meaning there's something blocking the husband from eating Truma because he doesn't have Brit Milah, but there's nothing blocking his wives and avadim that he had acquired to eat Truma. Patsua daka uchut shofcha, hen v'avdein yochlu b'truma. So a patsua daka and a kruf shofcha, which we're going to explain in a minute what that means, but basically it's somebody who's not allowed to enter the kahal. They're allowed to eat Truma, and their avadim are allowed to eat Truma, v'nishehen lo yochlu, but their wives cannot eat truma. That's because they are not allowed to. There's an isur in the Torah of a patsua daka being with somebody, with a regular bat Yisrael or bat Levi or bat Kohen, with someone who's not pasul. So if he is with her, he makes her a halala, and she's not allowed to eat truma. Ve'im lo yeda'a mishenase patsua daka, but if he didn't have bia with her once he became a patsua daka, meaning they got married, everything was fine, and then in the middle of the marriage, a few years into the marriage, he becomes a patsua daka, and they don't have bia after that, so he never had a bia with someone that he's not allowed to have bia with, and she never became pasul. So mishnah patsua daka chut harelu yochlu, then the wife could eat because there was never a bia of isur. Ve'ezu patsua daka kol shenifsu habetzim. Patsua daka is that the testicles are crushed. Shelo. Va'afilu achat mehem, even if only one of them is. Krut shofcha kol shenichrat hagid. That a krut shofcha is the actual ever is cut. Ve'im nishtayer mi'atara afilu krut sara kasher. If there's leftover from the top, from the tip of it, even a chutasara, a hair strand's worth, that's enough. So the Gemara is going to get into the details of that later. But for now, we're going to focus on the first part, that an arel is not allowed to eat truma. Someone who does not have a Brit Milah is not allowed to eat truma. Tanya, Amar Rabbi Elazar, Minayin le'arel she'enochel b'truma. How do we know that an arel does not eat truma? It doesn't say anywhere in the Torah that an arel cannot eat truma. So how do we know this? So ne'emar toshav v'sachir b'pesach, v'ne'emar toshav v'sachir b'truma. So it says by Pesach that a Toshav and Sachir cannot eat Korban Pesach, and it says by Truma also that a Toshav and Sachir cannot eat Truma. So we have a connection between Korban Pesach and Truma. So we're going to apply a halacha of Korban Pesach to Truma. The Ma Toshav Sachir Amor Pesach Arel Asur Bo. Just like by Korban Pesach, an Arel is not allowed to eat from Korban Pesach. That's a straight out pasuk in the Torah. Af Toshav and Sachir Amor Truma. Arel asur bo. So too, when it uses similar wording by Truma and it says Toshav and Sachir cannot eat, we learn from Korban Pesach to Truma that an Arel cannot eat. That's the first opinion. Rabbi Akiva Omer Eno Tzarich Hari Omer Ish L'Rabot Arel. Rabbi Akiva has a different reason. He says, it says in the pasuk that someone who's tameh cannot eat Truma, and it says Ish any individual who's tameh. So it says an additional time Ish. From there we include someone who's an arel, has the same status as someone who's tameh, and they cannot eat truma. So Amar Mar. So now Boker Tov. So Amar Mar. So now the Gemara is gonna go on the first reasoning. We said that there's a connection between a connection between Korban Pesach and Truma. It says Toshav and Sachir by Korban Pesach, and it says Toshav and Sachir by Truma. So just like by Korban Pesach and Arel cannot eat, also Truma and Arel cannot eat. So the Gemara says, Amar Mar, Rabbi Eliezer Omer, Ne'emar Toshav Zechir Pesach, Ne'emar Toshav Zechir B'Truma, Ma Toshav Zechir Hamar Pesach, Arel Asur Bo, Av Toshav Zechir Hamar Truma, Arel Asur Bo. So we just had that's the limud that we just said. That it says Toshav and Zechir by Pesach and by Truma, the same way that by Pesach an Arel cannot eat Korban Pesach, so too an Arel cannot eat Truma. So the Gemara says, Mufne. It has to be that this is not just a comparison, that we're just comparing, we have this rule by Korban Pesach, and let's compare it to Truma. It's not just a comparison, it's an actual Gezerah Shava. We have these words here that must be extra. It must be that these words that we're using to connect the two parshiot of Korban Pesach and of Truma are extra words, and we're making an actual real Gezerah Shava. What's the difference, whether it's just a comparison or a Gezerah Shava? Because if you have a comparison or a Kal V'chomer, then if you have an answer to it, if you have a reason why you shouldn't learn one from the other, so then you don't learn one from the other. But if you have an actual Gezerah Shava, even if you see things that are not similar, or you have a reason why, no, Korban Pesach is different. I can't learn from Korban Pesach to Truma because Korban Pesach has these stringencies. It doesn't matter. I have a Gezerah Shava. So the Gemara is saying, Mufne. These words are not used to teach me anything else, and therefore they're available for a Gezerah Shava. And it's a real limud. Di'lav Mufne, because if they're not available for a Gezerah Shava, Ikal Mifrach, Mal Pesach Shekin Chayavin Alav Mishum Pigul Notav Tameh. So the Gemara says, if it's not a Gezerah Shava, and you're just learning from Korban Pesach to Truma, I have an answer. You can't learn from Korban Pesach to Truma because Korban Pesach is more strict. Maybe only by Korban Pesach cannot Arel not eat, because Korban Pesach has other stringencies. You're Chayav for Pigul, Notar, Tameh. It can't be left over. Wrong Machshava during the Korban Pesach. Right? Those are all issues that apply by Korban Pesach and not by Truma. So it must be that it's a real Gezerah Shava. So the Gemara says, you're right. La'aya afnei mufne. The Gemara says, you're right. It's not the case. It is mufne. It isn't available. These words are extra. So we want to now prove that the words toshav and sachir are extra. So the Gemara says, hi mufne. Which toshav and sachir are extra? We have by Korban Pesach, it says toshav and sachir cannot eat. And we have by Truma, it says toshav and sachir cannot eat. So which one is extra? So the Gemara says, Eid Truma. If you want to tell me the one of Truma is extra, Matzrech Tzurichi. We need it to say that Toshav and Sachir cannot eat. Now, Detanya, we have a bright that teaches Toshav Zekanu Kinyan Olam. Toshav is an Eved Ivri that he is he's staying with you forever, right? The way it works by an Eved Ivri is he has a term, to either a 6-year term or to pay back, whatever he stole for whatever reason, however he sold himself as an Eved Ivri, up to 6 years, and then he goes free. And if he chooses to stay, he could stay. They take him to the doorpost, they pierce his ear. So Toshav is an Eved that stays with you forever. So I might think that basically the Torah is telling me that he is not allowed to eat Truma. And Sachir Zekanu Kinyan Shanim. And Sachir is referring to an Eved that's just temporarily under you. He's not staying forever. He didn't do the whole process of piercing his ear. He just is in the middle of his term. Let's say it's a 6-year term, so he's in the middle of his term. He also doesn't eat Truma. Only an Eved Kenani of a Kohen eats Truma, not an Eved Ivri, whether he's a permanent Eved or a temporary Eved. So that's what I need Toshav and Sachir for, to teach me that a permanent Eved and a temporary Eved do not eat Truma. So the Gemara says, V'yomer Toshav al Yomar Sachir. So fine. Why doesn't the Torah just say a permanent Eved doesn't eat Truma? And for sure I'll know that a temporary Eved doesn't eat Truma, right? V'ani Omer, Kanu Kinyan Olam, Ein Ochel, Kanu Kinyan Shanim Lo Kol Sheken. If someone who's a permanent Eved Ivri of a Kohen doesn't eat Truma, for sure a temporary Eved who's just there for a few years is not going to eat Truma. So the Gemara says, you're right, but...
Would it be the opposite?
No, because he's the property of an Eved. Meaning, when the Kohen, his Eved Kenani can eat Truma.
Oh, yeah.
His Eved Ivri, if it's a permanent Eved, cannot eat Truma. If it's a temporary Eved, for sure it should not be able to eat Truma.
What about the other way?
Why should it be the other way?
If it's permanent, it's more close to him, and if it's temporary,
yeah. So
it's
if even though he's permanent, he's not considered property of the Kohen to be able to eat Truma.
Oh, he's not property.
For sure, the temporary one. For sure, the temporary doesn't eat Truma.
I thought it'd be the other way.
Well, why? Why would it be the other way around? If I have my possessions, a Kohen's possessions are allowed to eat Truma. So his Eved Kenani is allowed to eat Truma. His animals are allowed to eat Truma. Right? So now. He has Eved Ivri. There's two types of Eved Ivri. There's Evet Ivri that's temporary or permanent.
The permanent's more
if,
property.
if I told you one of them was able to eat truma, what would you think?
I said the
permanent.
Yeah. So that's what we're saying. The Torah is saying the permanent Eved. I have a drasha that teaches me they're both not allowed to eat truma.
Okay.
So the Gemara is saying I only really need one drasha. Tell me one drasha that the permanent Eved is not allowed to eat truma.
It's not allowed.
Yeah, he's not allowed.
It says
so
it.
if he's not allowed, then of course the temporary one is not allowed.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah. So I don't need two separate drashas. Teach me one drasha for the permanent Eved.
So why you said you said you make difference between temporary and permanent? So the temporary could have terima, but
No. Sorry, if I said that was a mistake. No.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Okay. So Vali Omar Sachir. So Zimar says, so just say one drasha for the permanent Eved and don't say a drasha for the temporary Eved. Vani Omer Kanu Kinyan Olam Eno Ochel Kanu Kinyan Shalim Lo Kol Sheken. So Zimar says, Ilu Ken. If that was the case, if I would have only made one drasha, Haiti Omer Toshav Ze Kanu Kinyan Shalim. I would have thought that the drasha is referring to. So, Toshav is referring to somebody who's temporary, and I would have thought that a permanent could eat. So I need two drashas to tell me that both of them. Aval kanui kinyan olam ochel. That's what I would have thought. That someone who's kanui kinyan olam, I would have thought he would eat. A permanent eved would eat. So basachir v'limed el toshav. So the reason I need both words, sachir and toshav, is to teach me that basically if I would have just had one word, I would have thought it's referring to a temporary eved. So I need two words to teach me that no, one of them is even referring to a permanent eved. Sha'af al pisha kanui kinyan olam, even though he's a permanent eved, ein ochel, he doesn't eat truma. So either way, those words toshav and sachir by truma are being used to teach me that a temporary eved and a permanent eved are not able to eat truma. So ella de pesach mufne. So it must be that the words toshav and sachir by korban pesach are not being used, they're free, and we're using those words to make the Gzera Shava. So the Gemara says, Hai Toshav v'Sachir dekatav rachamana bePesach, ma'iniu. What is Toshav and Sachir referring to by Korban Pesach? It says, Toshav and Sachir cannot eat Korban Pesach. Well, what is that referring to? Inema Toshav v'Sachir mamash. If we're going to say that it's saying that an Eved Ivri, that's temporary or permanent, is not allowed to eat from the Korban Pesach, that doesn't make sense. Mishum dehavele toshav v'sachir iftar lemipesach. What? Just because he's an eved, that means he's patur from korban pesach. He's still a Yisrael, right? V'akay malan gabe truma delo achil. We hold that by truma, these avadim are not property of the owner,
both.
And they don't need truma. Yeah, both.
Even the permanent.
They're not property of the owner, therefore they don't need truma. So that means also there shouldn't be considered property of the owner and not have to do korban pesach. Mm-hmm. They're their own individuals with their own mitzvot.
Do they have certain freedoms that like does a permanent Eved Ivri have certain freedoms that the Eved Kanani doesn't have?
Certain freedoms?
Yeah, so just to show that he's not like a little bit different. So he's not proper.
We learn in the beginning of Kiddush, and the Gemara goes through the differences. Okay, so Alma Lokani Lerabeh. So what do you see? You see by an Eved Ivri, his master is not konehim. He's not quote unquote owned by the Adon. Therefore, he should have to bring his own korban pesach. So also over here, meaning if by truma he's not owned to be able to eat truma, so by korban pesach he's also not owned to not be chayav in korban pesach. So so you see the words toshav and sachir that are written by korban pesach are not necessary to teach me anything about korban pesach. Therefore, they're extra to make this gezerah shava. So the Gemara says v'akati mufne mitzad echad. But we only have, when you have a Gezerah Shava, the way a Gezerah Shava works is you have one word by one place and the same word in a different place. So over here, we have Toshav and Sachir by Truma, and we have Toshav and Sachir by Korban Pesach. So, okay, good. Toshav and Sachir by Korban Pesach are available, but Toshav and Sachir by Truma are not available. So this is called Mufne Mitzad Echad. Only one side, the words are free. So, says the Gemara, V'shaminan lil Rabbi Elazar de'amar mufne mitzad echad lemedin u'meshivin. Rabbi Elazar says when you have a Gezerah Shava like that only one side of it is the words are available, and the other side the words are used for something else. In that type of Gezerah Shava, you could learn it, but if you have a response to it, if you have a reason why one of them is more strict and you shouldn't be able to learn, then you can break it apart. So the Gemara says, Kevan delegufe lo tzarich shadichad alamed v'shadichad amlamed. The Gemara says, well, we have two words over here, toshav and sachir. Since both of them are not in use and both of them are available, we can apply one to Pesach and one to Truma. And therefore it's a gzera shava that's good from both sides. Okay, so now basically at this point we've established we have a gzera shava, toshav and sachir. We learn from Korban Pesach to Truma. And what do we learn? So we learn that just like an arel, someone who doesn't have a brit milah is not allowed to eat Korban Pesach, they're also not allowed to eat Truma. So the Gemara says, well, maybe you should learn some other halacha from Korban Pesach. How do you know that to learn an arel? The Gemara says, Ima onen asurbo, av Truma asurbo. Why don't we say that just like an onen, someone who has not yet buried their relative, is asur to eat a Korban Pesach, so too they cannot eat Truma. The Gemara suggests that. So the Gemara says, no. Amar Rabbi Yossi, Bar Chanina, Amar Kra, the Chol Zar. It says really two times that a Zar cannot eat Truma. So Zarut Amarti Lecha V'lo Aninut. So we learn from there a Zar cannot eat, but an Onen can eat. So basically what's going on is we have one pasuk, Toshav V'Sachir, that teaches me something that's asur by Korban Pesach is going to be asur by Truma. And we have another pasuk that says Kol Zar, that's coming to say only a Zar cannot eat, but someone else can eat. Something that's asur elsewhere is mutar to eat Truma. So the Gemara says, well, Ve'ema Orlot, why don't we say Velo Orlot, that an Arel is not excluded from Korban Pesach? Aktiv Toshav V'Sachir, or we have Toshav V'Sachir. So, umay right. So the Gemara basically wants to know, we have one drasha that says something we learn from Korban Pesach, someone cannot eat Truma. We have another drasha that says someone who you might think cannot eat Truma elsewhere, who doesn't eat Truma elsewhere, can eat Truma. So we're choosing to say, who's the guy that cannot eat Truma? An Arel. Who's the guy that can eat Truma? Onen. So the Gemara says, how do you know to choose? Maybe an Onen is the one that cannot eat. He put the drasha that says someone cannot eat Truma from Korban Pesach. Maybe that's talking about an Onen. And an Arel, he can eat Truma. Like, how do you know to use the drasha that's excluding someone from Truma to refer to an Arel? So the Gemara says like this.
Why Arel cannot?
So, well, we learn from a Gzera Shava. We learn from the
Psukim.
Psukim.
How works exactly?
So yeah, we have words that are the same words in two different parshiot. We have there's different people who cannot eat Truma. A Kohen who is born a Patsua Daka, or a Kohen who becomes Tameh, or a Kohen who they're different.
Born with it.
Yeah, a Kohen could also be born as a Patsua, Patsua Daka is allowed to eat Truma. But either way, it doesn't matter. There's certain psulim that make a person pasul from eating Truma, and one of them is an Arel. The way we learn it is through Korban Pesach. But the Gemara is going to explain right now a little bit related to your question. The Gemara is going to explain, okay, we have two options of what to exclude. We could have said an Arel cannot, just like by Korban Pesach. Well, let's go. Because the way Gzera Shava works is I have a word in one parsha, in this case Korban Pesach, and a word in another parsha, in this case Truma. It's the same word. The same word is there to match up or phrase to teach me that we learn a halacha from Korban Pesach to Truma. Now, in this case, we're choosing to learn the halacha that Arel, just like he cannot eat Korban Pesach, he cannot eat Truma. And we have a completely different pasuk by Truma that teaches us that there is someone who cannot eat other things who can eat Truma. Who is that? The Gemara says Onen. Now what the Gemara is going to do is, why are you choosing Arel to include in the Gzera Shava to say that he's Asur to eat Truma, maybe you should do Onen. Maybe Onen should be the one that's Asur. That's what the Gemara's question is right now.
Just because if you have two categories that are different and two sets of things that are in both categories, that's what sets up something for Gzera Shava.
Gzera Shava is just something that was given to Moshe at Har Sinai. It's a phrase or word that appears in two separate parshiot is there specifically to teach me that you apply halachas from one to the other. So in this case, we're choosing to apply the halacha.
How do we know which words to use? Because
okay, so that gets
like
into
the word but or and or
yeah.
It has to be a special word of some kind.
Yeah, no, it has to be that you have a Masorah for it. You can't just make it up. It has to. These were given to Moshe at Har Sinai. It has to be
the Masorah. Then why do you need the Gzera Shava? Then you just had the Masorah.
Some say that Moshe Rabbeinu was given the words and he had to figure out how to use them. He had to figure out or some say he was given half and he had to connect the other half.
So we don't know when we see it. That you have to read in the Gemara to find out where the Gzera Shavas are. You don't know.
What do you mean?
Tell until they tell us where they are.
Yeah, we can't make up our own. We have to have a Masorah for it. This is going through the process of how we come out with this halacha for the Gzera Shava.
It has to be a word that's in two different places.
Yes, a word or a phrase is in two different places. Yes,
and it has to be kind of special. It can't just be like the or
yes,
or something.
Correct.
It has to be like a very.
Okay, so let's see. So the Gemara says, you know why we're choosing to learn that an arel is the one that's excluded from Truma? Because an arel is much more strict. Number one, so the Gemara says, Orlot haveler buye sheked mechusar maaseh. An arel he's lacking in action. He needs to do an action of Brit Milah. Umaaseh begufo, and it's an action that applies to his body, as opposed to an onen. He's not missing any action. There's no action that he has to do to his body. He has to bury the guy, but there's no action he has to do to his body. V'onesh karet, and if a person doesn't do Brit Milah, it's karet. And onen, there's no karet. V'yesh no lifnei adibur. Brit Milah is something that came before Matan Torah, was commanded to Avraham Avinu already. Umilat zecharav v'avadav ma'akivot. And also by Korban Pesach, if he has to, his children and his avadim also need to have Brit Milah in order for him to bring Korban Pesach. So you see, there are a list of 5 things here that make Arel much more strict. So it makes sense that an Arel should be the one who's not allowed to eat Truma because it has all these stringencies. So the Gemara says, Adarabba. Aninu tavale rebuye. So the Gemara says, no, I'll tell you why an Onen is more strict now, and why an Onen should have been the one that you learn. Oh, if an Onen cannot eat Korban Pesach, Onen cannot eat Truma either. We should say that. Sheken, yeshna bechol sha'ah. An Onen is something that could be recurring. Arel, it's something that once, you have it once, he has a Brit Milah, he does a Milah, and that's it. Onen is something that could happen multiple times, it could be recurring. Also, v'noheget banashim v'nashim. Also, Onen applies to men and women. Brit Milah only applies to men. Right? And only a man could be an Arel. Ve'en biyado letaken et atzmo. Also, Onen, there's nothing he can do about it to fix it. It's not in his hands. Brit Milah, it's in his hands. He could just get a Brit Milah. He could do it. Onen, he can't do anything that will make him not an Onen. So the Gemara says, you're right, but we had 5 things that were more strict by Arel, and only 3 things that were more strict by Onen. So Hanach Nefishin, the ones by Arel, there's more reasons why it's strict. Therefore, Arel is the one that's included in the Isur. That Arel is what we're saying we learned from Korban Pesach, just like it's Asur to eat Korban Pesach, it's Asur to eat Truma. Rava says, Below Hanach Nefishin and Nami lo matzit amrit, Shavkinan arlut dichtiv begufe de Pesach v'yalfinan aninut mi Pesach. The Pesach gufe mi gamrina. And so Rava says a different reason why it makes sense. If we have 2 choices, right? We have a Gzera Shava to learn from Korban Pesach to Truma. So at this point, we're discussing 2 options. Either we could learn just like an Arel cannot eat Korban Pesach, an Arel cannot eat Truma, or there's a Havamina to say just like an Onen cannot eat Korban Pesach, an Onen cannot eat Truma. So first answer was no, there's more reasons why an Arel should be Asur. Second answer, Rava is saying it doesn't make sense by Korban Pesach itself. How do we know that an Arel is Asur? it says in the pasuk that an arel cannot eat korban pesach.
Right.
Kol arel yochel. How do we know that an onen cannot eat korban pesach? We learn it from a roundabout way. It doesn't say directly by korban pesach. So if we're going to choose to apply a halacha of korban pesach to truma, which halacha are we going to apply? The one that it says directly by korban pesach, or the one that you learn in a roundabout way? So Rava says it makes sense that we would learn the one that it says directly by korban pesach.
What about both?
That's what Rava is saying. So the reason we can't do both is because we had another pasuk by truma that taught us that there's an exclusion from those. I mean, that said, you know who's not allowed to eat truma? A zar, and it said it twice. So we learned from there. It's very specific to a zar, but there is someone else who you may have thought is not allowed to eat truma who can.
Zar.
That's an onen. That's what we're learning.
What's a zar again?
Zar is someone who is a stranger, literally a non-kohen, but
A zar can't eat. A zar means not a kohen.
a non-kohen, yeah.
Like Eved, like what's the name?
So now the Gemara has another suggestion. So let's go. We're by where it says Ima Pesach. So the Gemara says Ima Pesach milad zecharav va'avadav me'akevet af truma milad zecharav va'avadav me'akevet. So the Gemara says I have another suggestion. Why don't we learn the following from Korban Pesach? We should say like this. Just look, by Korban Pesach, in order for someone to bring and eat Korban Pesach, he has to, not only does he have to have, he cannot be an Arel, but his sons and his Avadim also need to have a Brit Milah. That's
What? In order for, like, if you have a kid that does, like, if you have, then you can't either.
yes.
Like if something that happens.
Yeah, it says Umalta Oto Az Yochal Bo.
What
That
if
you
your
do Brit
kid
Milah
was
to
just
the.
born and it's not 8 days yet? Then you're just.
Okay, so the Gemara is going to get to. I believe the Gemara is going to get to under 8 days at a little bit later, but that's a halacha in Korban Pesach that a person needs to have his avadim and his sons need to have brit milah in order for him to be able to bring Korban Pesach. So the Gemara says
say that.
what?
In order for him to bring Korban Pesach?
Yeah, the
in
pasuk
order
says
for them to eat Korban.
no. In order for him, it says
He can't eat it, right? Or you say
both.
he can't both.
Both. He can't eat it and he can't bring it. So, but the pasuk says. Kol eved ish miknat kasef umaltab oto az yochal bo. That first you have to your avadim have to have brit milah, and then you could eat korban pesach. And then there's another pasuk. It says himol lo kol zachar vazikrav la'asoto. You have to first do brit milah to all of your sons, then you could bring korban pesach.
Can one of your other sons eat korban pesach?
No,
The whole family.
You can't even bring it.
Is out.
You can't even bring it. Yeah, we're gonna get to these halacha more in the next amud. But for now, what we need to know is this is a halacha that exists. That if somebody does not have his avadim,
So if some kid that has brit milah and his brother doesn't, he's out of luck because his brother doesn't have one, right? And
if they're part of the family, yeah, we're gonna get to
he's
these.
never gonna have Pesach.
No, when he has his own family, he will. But
Is he
we'll
allowed
get to.
Is he allowed to visit someone else's house and eat there?
We'll get to these things in the
Okay.
next time.
All right.
Yeah, we'll get to these in the next time. So the Gemara is suggesting here that why don't we say that that's what you learn from Korban Pesach? Just like by Korban Pesach, a person needs to have his avadim and his children need to all have brit milah in order to bring Korban Pesach. So too, when it comes to truma, we have a connection between Pesach and truma. So why don't we learn that his avadim need to have brit milah in order for him to be able to eat truma? So the Gemara says, "Ima Pesach milad zecharav va'avadav ma'akevet af truma milad zecharav va'avadav ma'akevet." If that's what you want to learn, so Amar Kra umalta oto az yochal bo. The pasuk says by Korban Pesach you need milah to eat it. So it's very specific to Korban Pesach. You don't need milah to eat anything else. You don't need milah to eat a milah of your avadim to eat truma. So milad zecharav va'avadav ma'akevet bo, milah of his sons and his avadim, they'll hold him back from bringing korban pesach milech or eating korban pesach milechol pesach. Ve'en milad zecharav va'avadav ma'akevet b'truma. But his children don't have to have a brit milah in order for him to eat truma. It's not going to stop him from eating truma. So the Gemara says, okay. So if you want to play that game and say, it says bo, so yihachi ema kol arel lo yochal bo. The pasuk says, "Kol arel lo yochal bo." An arel cannot eat korban pesach. So if the guy himself doesn't have a brit milah, he can't eat korban pesach. So why don't we learn that bo eno ochel, aval ochel hu b'truma? He cannot eat korban pesach, but he could eat truma. So the Gemara says, "Haktiv toshav v'sachir." No, we had another pasuk that taught me that we learn with something that's asur by korban pesach is asur by truma. So we're stuck with the same thing that we were before.
Pesach is asur, but
not everything, but I'm going to explain in a moment. So the Gemara says, right. So basically, we have one limud that teaches me something that's asur by korban pesach is asur by truma. I have another limud. Yes, we have another limud that teaches me that that something that is asur by pesach is specific to pesach. Now, we're discussing two options. One of them is the guy himself has a milah. It doesn't have a milah. He's an arel. And the other one is his avadim and his sons don't have a brit milah. So one of them is going to be specific to Pesach. One of them we're going to apply to Truma also. Okay, for Korban Pesach, both of them are true. If he himself doesn't have a brit milah, he cannot eat Korban Pesach. If his avadim or his children don't have a brit milah, he cannot eat Korban Pesach. So one of them is gonna. We have one drasha that tells me one of those applies to truma as well, and we have another drasha that tells me one of them doesn't apply to truma. So which one? The Gemara wants to know. How do we know which one to apply?
So one's saying everything in Pesach applies to truma.
Not everything.
As far as exclusionary stuff, and then the other one says, no, it's not true.
No. One. We have two separate drashot. One drasha teaches me that out of these halachot. We have two halachot that we're discussing. One of them is that a person who doesn't have a brit milah cannot eat korban pesach.
Right.
Another halacha is a person's children and avadim must have a brit milah in order for him to eat korban pesach.
And those two things.
We have two drashas. One drasha teaches me one of them applies to truma. One drasha teaches me one of them doesn't apply to truma.
Are they both talking about the same one or talking about two different ones?
So the Gemara, they could both be. You could finagle the drashas to make it go either way. All we know is one of them would apply, one of them doesn't apply. So the Gemara wants to know, how do we know which one applies to truma?
So everything that applies to Pesach, it's not.
It's not a blanket thing that everything applies.
Otherwise, they could only eat matzah with the truma.
So the Gemara says, right? What do you see to include one and exclude the other? So the Gemara says, mistabra or lo de. It makes sense that what should be included in the isur is when a person himself is an arel. Sheken maaseh begufo. It's something that is an action that he's doing to himself, which makes it more strict. Boker tov.
Did you call him?
No.
Oh my goodness.
Okay, let's do the next couple lines. V'onish karet. It's if someone doesn't get a brit milah, it's karet, and so you see two things that are more strict by milah of himself than it is by milah of his avadim.
I thought it'd be karet on the father. I mean.
So one second, let's finish up. Adrabah, milad zecharav v'avadav havlil ribuye. The Gemara says it should be the other way around. That milah of the sons and the avadim should be included. Sheken yeshna b'chol sha'ah, because it's something that's recurring. It's something that there's not once in a lifetime thing. He buys a new eved, he has to give him a brit milah too. Buys a new eved, has a new son, something that happen multiple times. So the Gemara says hanach nefishin. The reasons that to be strict by milah of himself are more. The Gemara says, or lo hanach nefishin nami lo matzitam rit lo matzitam, right? Mi kamidi de orla de gufe lo mi'akva be orla de achrini mi'akva be. It doesn't make sense to say that he has to give milah to his sons in order to eat truma, but he himself doesn't have to have brit milah. It must be what we're learning from Korban Pesach is that he himself needs to have brit milah. So just like basically what comes out at the end of the day, what comes out at the end of the day is just like, but we learned from Korban Pesach, just like by Korban Pesach, a person needs to have a brit milah. He if he's an arel, he cannot eat Korban Pesach. So too, if he's an arel, he cannot eat truma. But so he doesn't need to give his children a brit milah to be able to eat truma, like Korban Pesach. And also an onen is allowed to eat truma, not like Korban Pesach. Okay, tomorrow we'll